If you want 2025 to be a better year for your finances, well, here are 5 practical ways that you can take control of your money and make that money go that little bit further. Starting off with making use of high interest rate savings accounts. Here's a crazy statistic for you. In around the middle of last year, the Bank of England reported that there was £253 billion sat in bank accounts paying no interest despite higher interest rates. That's a mountain of cash that people were simply sat on and not benefiting in any way from it. And if you are one of those people, then it might be worth considering doing something about it. After all, you don't exactly need to be loyal to your banking provider nowadays because it's just so easy to switch bank accounts. Or even if you do want to stick with your banking provider, then they may have an existing savings product that might be suitable for you. And then it just becomes as simple as making a bank transfer. But for those that don't know, now let's discuss some of the different types of savings accounts because, of course, you don't want to end up opening the wrong one. So let me break down the 3 main options. So you've got an instant access savings account, you've got a limited access savings account, and you've got a fixed rate savings account. Now, the instant access is where you can pay money in and take it out whenever you please. A limited access account means that you'll be limited to the number of withdrawals that you can make. And if you go over that allocation of withdrawals, then you may incur a penalty charge for doing so. Then finally, you have a fixed rate account whereby you essentially tie up your money for a fixed duration of time in return for a fixed rate of interest. And typically, the longer you tie your money up for, you potentially will get a higher rate of interest on that money. But obviously, do be mindful that your money may be locked up for the full duration of time that it's in that account. Or indeed, if you try and withdraw that money, then you may incur a penalty for doing so. Now, you can go onto websites like the Money Saving Expert because they do a ton of research on some of the best paying savings accounts that are out on the market today in order to give you a bit of an idea of what kind of account you could open. Now, just for some added context, let's say that you did open an account with someone like Trading 2 on 2, who are at the top of the Money Saving Expert list, and they were paying that 4.9% interest rate, and you dropped $5,000, let's say, into the account. You would earn about £20 a month in interest. But obviously, the more you save, the more income that you will generate from interest being paid on the cash savings that you have with that provider. So it's always wise to have an account that pays a higher interest rate versus having an account that doesn't. And we'll discuss how you can actually avoid paying tax on that earned interest that you've gained a little bit later on in the video, so be sure to stay tuned for that. Second up, we've got check your pension pot and your pension contributions. Here's another statistic for you. There was research conducted by Vanguard UK that shows that for single retirees who qualify for a full state pension, which is like £11,000 or £12,000 a year as at recording, you would need £488,688 in a pension pot in order to afford a moderate living standard during retirement. Now, that moderate lifestyle during retirement, you may be wondering, unfortunately doesn't include a 5-star Caribbean cruise or anything like that, sadly. Instead, a moderate lifestyle, as published by the Pensions and Lifetime Savings Association, includes spending like £55 a week on a food shop, a 3-year-old small car which is replaced every 7 years, a £30 budget to give presents on a birthday or Christmas, and a fortnight 3-star all-inclusive holiday somewhere in Europe. It's a bit mad really how little like a £500,000 pension pot gets you nowadays. Now, we also must bear in mind that those numbers are based on today's numbers, so actually unless you're approaching kind of state pension age, they're not particularly useful, especially for someone like myself that's still some like 39 years away from state pension age as things stand right now. In actual fact, by the time I get to state pension age, that's even if there is a state pension by the time I get there, then I would need far more than a £488,000 pension pot due to the effects of inflation. But the problem that we're all facing collectively is based on data from the Office of National Statistics. If we look at the age range of people that are already in their 60s, so they're already kind of close to that state pension age and therefore would need that kind of nearly £500,000 pension pot for that moderate level of lifestyle during retirement that we've just spoken about, then actually most people are nowhere near that figure whatsoever. Actually, the average size pension pot for a man in their 60s is £228,000, and for a woman, it's even less at £152,000. So substantially lower than the kind of required pot size for a moderate lifestyle during retirement. So clearly, based on this data, there's a massive shortfall, and therefore, chances are we probably all need to be doing something about it. So this is where I will say make the consideration to go and have a look at your pension pot and how much is in it, along with how much your actually contributing towards that pension, because you might find that you might not actually be doing enough for your retirement. And also make the most of your employer contributions too. Because when I was working a full-time job, when I was contributing towards my pension via a salary sacrifice, I knew that if I was able, I can't remember the numbers exactly, but I knew that if I marginally increased my contributions to my pension, that my employer would also marginally increase their contributions too. Now, typically, as it says on the government website, it's a 3% employer match when you contribute 5% to your pension, giving you a total of essentially 8% of your monthly pay going into your pension pot. But as I say, some employers may do more if you also contribute more. So be sure to check out what that is and what your company policies are around those pension contributions, because you could be getting a little bit more for your money from your employer. And it may seem a little bit silly and perhaps even hard to comprehend for me to say this, but just increasing your contributions by even like 1 or 2 or even 3% will have a substantially big impact on your pension pot value in 20, 30 or 40 years from now. To make all of this a little bit easier, I'm going to put a pension calculator down in the description below from the Money Helper, so you can plug in all of your own numbers at your leisure and check that you are on track for your kind of desired lifestyle during retirement, because after all, we've worked our asses off for the best part of 40 years and it's probably the least we deserve. Next up, be sure to utilize your ISA allowance. Remember when I said a little bit earlier on in the video to make the most of high interest rate savings accounts? Well, whilst in practice that is all well and good, if you are a massive cash hoarder with lots of cash lying around in your savings account, then unfortunately you might be left with quite the tax bill to pay that you might have been unaware of. The way this works is when you add up all of the interest that you've earned from the cash savings that you have, if that total amount is above your personal allowance, which is dictated by your income tax band, then you may owe a little bit of tax to HMRC. Now, in terms of what those allowances are exactly, for those that are in the basic income rate tax band, you have a personal savings allowance of £1,000 per year. If you're in the higher rate tax band, you have a savings allowance of just £500 a year. And if you're an additional rate taxpayer, well, you don't have any personal savings allowance per year. Now, to add a layer of context on that, if say you were to open a savings account that paid a 4% rate of interest on an annual basis, you could actually deposit as a basic rate taxpayer £25,000 into that account before you then had to pay a single penny in tax to HMRC. If you're a high rate taxpayer, that would be £12,500 before you used up your allowance. And obviously, if you're an additional rate taxpayer, well, you would pay tax on any penny of interest that you'd earn to HMRC. Now, that's unless you use something called an individual savings account, also known as an ISA. This is a perfectly legitimate tax-efficient account where the government allows you to contribute an allowance to multiple different ISA accounts that are available. The most common one for the purpose of saving money is the cash ISA, where the government allows you to contribute £20,000 a year into that account without having to pay a single penny tax, despite what the interest rate is that you're earning on that money. It avoids all of those complications of having your money just sat in a regular savings account, which is all subject to tax, as I've explained. Now, to be fair, I suspect that most people probably didn't even know that this tax actually existed until interest rates started to go up. Because before that, well, interest rates were like 0.5% or 0.1% prior to that, and if you were earning more than your personal allowance in interest when rates were that low, then you would have been doing pretty well for yourself. It is important for me to say, though, that £20,000 allowance, which I mentioned, is actually shared across the different ISA accounts that are available. So you could say put £10,000 into a stocks and shares ISA. You could put £4,000 into a lifetime ISA, which is actually the limit on that specific ISA account, and say then an additional £6,000 into a cash ISA, to make up that total £20,000 allowance for each tax year. There is a fourth ISA account that is available called the Innovative Finance ISA, but it's perhaps a less popular one and a less commonly used one, so let's just brush over that one for now. Number 4 is to invest for your future. According to statistics from Finder, 23% of the UK adult population invested in the stock market in 2024, which is pretty wild considering that the S&P 500, which is a collection of the top 500 companies in the United States of America, returned just shy of about 24% in 2024, and even the FTSE 250 returned about 7% in 2024, and that excludes any dividends too. Now, the reason why I mention that is because those rates of returns are significantly higher than that of the savings rates, which we discussed earlier on in the video. Now, obviously, investing in the stock market does carry risk. Making any kind of investment does carry risk, so it's important to understand what your own risk appetite is before you go on to make any kind of investment. But generally speaking, when investing consistently over a long duration of time, investing in risk on assets has typically outperformed the person that's just hoarded cash for their whole life. There was a study done by Vanguard back in 2023, which actually showed the inflationary adjusted returns of cash, UK bonds, and UK shares between 1900 and to the end of 2022. So just over 120 years of back-tested data this study was based on, and it actually showed that cash achieved an average rate of return, a real rate of return of 0.87%. UK bonds sat at 1.44% and UK shares sat at 5.35%. That's a substantial outperformance on cash, and this is also a real rate of return, so it also accounts for inflation having an impact and eroding the value of that money over time too. And kind of just goes to show the importance of actually investing in risk on assets over a long duration of time in order to grow your real wealth. Let's just talk hypothetically for a moment, and let's just say that we put £200 into each one of these different asset classes over, say, a 40-year period. If we assume that we achieve those same rates of return that I've just presented, for cash, you would end up with £115,056. For bonds, slightly higher, £130,071. But for the UK stock market, you would have ended up with £336,306. You can see the difference for yourself, and it just goes to show the importance of investing as part of a long-term financial plan. I do, of course, have to say that past performance isn't necessarily indicative of future results, though, so I'll leave you to go and do some more further research on that. Then finally, we've got starting a side hustle. Once you've optimized your finances for the future based on what you have right now, it's probably then worthwhile considering whether what you have right now is enough for you and your family or not. And if it's not, then starting a side hustle might be a good option for you. 60% of Brits right now say that they've had to make cuts due to cost of living pressures. I kind of hate the thought that people are out there working hard, but that money seems to be going less and less far for every single year that goes by due to increased housing costs, increased bills, increased food costs, increased insurance, just about an increase on just about everything. I mean, I don't even really think that there's such thing as a cheap holiday nowadays, and everything just seems mad expensive. And the reality is wages just haven't kept up with those increase in living costs, and because of that, everybody's feeling the pinch on their finances. So the only way to kind of overcome that, as I found out personally, is to start a side hustle. For some, that might feel like additional effort just to kind of maintain the living standards that they come to expect, or perhaps for some of you, you may feel like you want to actually get financially ahead in life, which could also make it a very viable option. It's essentially what I did. I started a side hustle. It took 4 years or so, and then I quit my full-time job, and it became a full-time business. And the best thing is there are so many opportunities out there right now thanks to the internet and social media. If you're stuck for ideas, literally get onto something like ChatGPT and just plug in, tell it what you're interested in, and that you want to start a side hustle, and to kind of give you some ideas based on the interest that you've got. Like, let's just do an example quickly together. Let me just type in that I would like to start a side hustle but need some ideas. I enjoy football, finance, and F1. Could you give me 5 different side hustles for each of these areas that I could pursue? And then, as you guys can see, it literally will type out within a matter of seconds 15 different ideas which you could potentially look to go and try. And look, it doesn't matter whether you've started out with the intention of just needing to make a couple of extra £100 a month, or whether you want to make a couple of extra £1,000 a month. Just get started and then just see where you end up. That was kind of the position that I was in like 5 years ago, and I literally turned on a camera, started making videos that I was passionate about, and it kind of turned out quite well for me so far. Now, if you do want to learn a little bit more about the inner workings of how I turned my side hustle into a profitable full-time business, well, be sure to click on that video next. And with that being said, I'll see you over in the next one.